In The Net tonight, Benjamin Woolley connects a camcorder to a computer for that instant Fellini feeling. Susan Ray asks whether computers are just toys for the boys. Plus our games review with Jules, how nanotechnology is going to make us all immortal, and the American Army shows off its vast virtual battlefield.
Professional TV is a big, complicated business. Producing a show like The Net takes cameras, crews, lights, editors, producers, and a sixth floor full of important executives. But this time it's going to be different. This time I'm going to get rid of this lot and have a go at doing it myself. So off you go then, go on, shoo.
With the advent of the camcorder, we've been given a glimpse of a new type of TV, a type that, as initiatives like the BBC's own Video Diaries shows, provides a different, some would say more democratic, view of the world. But it's perhaps not the video camera but the desktop computer that provides the most exciting prospect for putting the power of TV production into the hands of the people.
Until recently, only big beautiful boxes like these, a so-called graphics workstation, could cope with video. Only they had the processing power needed to handle the huge amounts of data that a video signal contains. But now, with the emergence of faster microprocessors and cheaper components, a new breed of more modest system is claiming video capability. There's the latest Acorn computer, a machine better known in educational circles, but making a bid to leave school and enter the big outside world of business. There's the all-singing and dancing Apple Power Mac with its high media profile and drop-dead designer screen. And there's even the unglamorous IBM PC Compatible, claiming to have gone supersonic with the introduction of new chips like the Pentium. Alternatively, you can try to upgrade an existing system by adding what's called a video capture card to your computer. These are about as easy to mate successfully as a pair of giant pandas, but assuming you've managed to get them connected, all you need then do is plug your video camera or recorder into the back of the computer, and then watch as the picture appears suitably diced and digitized on your computer screen.
Whatever your chosen upgrade path, your first glimpse of desktop video will in all likelihood be a disappointing one. All that dicing will have taken its toll. With a standard capture board, you'll end up with something that looks rather distressingly like a smeared postage stamp. With more advanced hardware, you'll get something that looks more like a pirate video, and that's about as good as it gets. But you don't digitize video in order to watch it like TV. Once it's in the system, it's no longer just a sequence of pictures that you have to look at in their own disorderly progression. It's become data like any other, ready for processing.
As anyone in the business will tell you, the secret of good television is editing. And as word processors demonstrated with text, that's something that computers are particularly good at.
There's now a range of software programs designed to help you create the televisual sort, software that makes it far easier to marshal your material than any conventional editing suite. Indeed, being digital, this stuff comes loaded with video effects that would put a 1970s edition of Top of the Pops to shame. Wipes, ripples, barn doors, solarization, zoom trails, it's all here. With all these effects at your disposal, you can conjure up a pop promo and a pretty nasty headache in minutes. But that's just the beginning. You're not confined to using material you shot yourself. Subject, of course, to the usual restrictions of copyright, you can pull a TV program off air, use a sample movie, perhaps one from a game.
A sick game!
Combine it with animations, add some graphics, gather some photographs, 3D animated images you'll find on the growing number of so-called clip CD-ROMs, throw in some digitized and sampled sounds. The tough bit comes in turning the resulting mess into some sort of meaningful melange of image and sound. When desktop publishing arrived in the mid-1980s, users went berserk. Ransom letters used a more tasteful selection of fonts. The same problem is emerging with desktop video, producing compositions with all the harmony and coherence of a road accident.
Furthermore, there's literally no end to what you can do. There's no time of transmission. No final print, no, as they say in the BBC, programme as broadcast.
The material remains forever fluid on your hard disk, a scrapbook of digital odds and ends for you to add to as you see fit. And being digital, it's become part of a virtual world fast filling up with video. You can already get images of all sorts over the internet, such as a live video feed of the state of the surf on a Florida beach. And there's the video phone, the once exotic toy that seemed forever suspended in tomorrow's world, now becoming just another add-on feature for today's office network.
Desktop video is usually marketed as a business presentation tool, an exciting new way of explaining corporate visions and scintillating sales figures. But it could go much further than that. It could be a new means of communication, an intense, multifaceted way of seeing the world and letting the world see you.
Back in the 70s, when computers were still a rare sight for most people, a quarter of all applicants to do computer science were women. Now, when PCs are everywhere, less than 1 in 10 young people who go on to study computing are women. For some reason, it seems girls still believe that computers like hi-fis or sports cars are still just toys for the boys.
I think the feeling is that girls are getting put off at school. About 15 years or so ago, we didn't have micros in schools, so computers weren't for boys or girls, they were for both. But now boys get hooked at school, they really get addicted. And of course they come to do computing at university and college, whereas girls have been put off by then. And I think young children do have quite a strong perception of what's a boy's thing and what's a girl's thing. Also, most schools aren't terribly well resourced. There's perhaps one, if you're lucky, one computer in the classroom. So it's quite easy for boys to cluster around it to keep it to themselves.
Machines are seen as male, except for a few, like microwaves and washing machines and dishwashers. But machines as a whole are seen as male. Now, computers are an extension of that. What you have to convince a woman is that if she can handle one of the high-tech cookers, she can handle a high-tech computer. I have actually encouraged one very frightened teacher, I remember, to sit on the computer and show her complete and utter contempt for it. That made her feel a lot better. And after that, she progressed very well. So there is hope, but we actually have to work very hard at actually achieving these changes and getting girls to feel confident to work with computers.
When Steve Shirley wanted to advance her career in information technology, she started her own computer company. Its flexible working practices has attracted a workforce that's 70% women.
What would you do about the areas where women do seem to have a problem with computing, where they feel that men are elbowing them out?
When you look at something like the computer science courses, they all seem to be starting with the hardware, which historically was the first, and then moving on to the software, which when I started the business was given away free with the hardware, and then thinking about the applications, and then thinking about the added value. Now, women would actually prefer a computer science course that started with the software and applications and then went the other way. Now, that's the sort of change that might attract more women to actually study and take computer science seriously. But there are all sorts of opportunities where you don't really need a computer science degree. You need to understand business. You need to think about how to apply computing in the real world.
New technologies like virtual reality and new means of communication like the internet have huge potential to empower women. Some women may say we have lost ground in the real world, but we can find a room of our own in cyberspace where no one need be how they appear.
What is really important is the future, and virtual reality is one of the most important things that's happening at the moment. It's being sold at the moment as a very masculine thing again, computer games, war games, the arcades and so on. But for women, for the first time, you've got an interface with the technology that is really very like the stereotypical women's thought patterns. And here at last is a technology that I believe is going to be very important for women.
People talk in terms of colonising cyberspace, of claiming it as a new space, as though we were talking about some geographical space, which of course we're in a very different situation to that. I think that there is no need really to think about women having to colonise cyberspace. There is some very fundamental way in which cyberspace is already female, or at least it's already not male, which is the crucial thing. It seems that a lot of men, for example, now signing onto the internet and other multiple use domains tend to either want to become dragons or some other non-human form, or else indeed to become women themselves in that context. And I think in a way really the notion of being a man will become increasingly a redundant idea. Being a man really is about having a strong sense of identity, a strong sense of self-importance, one might say. And I think you only have to read a writer like Pat Cadigan to realise that that very strong sense of identity, which feminists have also really encouraged women to develop, obviously was a great advantage in the past, but I think it's really going to be more of a liability in the future.
I insist on living in the type of world where the word feminist is as quaint as the word suffragette, you know. Where I live, all of my feminist wishes have come true and everything's settled. And of course the rest of the world isn't up to speed with me, so every so often it's necessary to teach someone a lesson. On the whole, I feel that, you know, there's a big potential on the internet to empower people who have not felt empowered. That includes women. It's a trip to be able to manipulate all this information, or go out and get the information that you need, you know, go and get the understanding that you need of something. You know, it's like you're not cut off from anything. Everything's open to you.
Next in our weekly games review, Jules gets into top gear with Virtua Racing on the Sega Megadrive. And still to come in the net, what's the big idea about very small technology? Plus how the virtual cavalry is coming over the virtual hill.
Hey, look! This is a warehouse. And this is a nice view. Wow, Switch, you are good. And this is a Megadrive. Today I'm going to tell you about Virtua Racing. First of all, it's expensive. This is one stupid, crazy, no way, I can't believe it price. Second, it's a vroom, vroom, meow, screech game. It was great in the amusement arcades and it's great on the Megadrive. The rules are simple, just race around the track faster than all the other cars. The pictures look great, and they also look great from this angle, and even from this angle. The fun really starts when you play against a friend. For those who are clueless, the top half of the picture is me and the bottom half is my friend. This is one of the best brum brum games ever. It's a shame about the price. And before I go, the score out of 10 for Virtua Racing would be 9.7 if it didn't cost so much. At £70, it only deserves 3.5. Okay, bye.
Cambridge University is one of Britain's main centres of research into computer microchips. Scientists here believe the technological revolution will soon allow us to shrink the size of microchips to an atomic scale and to build the first truly intelligent machines. Colin Humphreys, who is Professor of Material Science here, says this is thanks to a new branch of atomic science called nanotechnology, which will transform the way we think about computers and ourselves.
We know the human brain has consciousness because of the complexity of all the connections in it. Our brain is different from chimpanzees' brains or dogs' brains just because of the complexity of the connections. And if we can shrink the size of computer elements and transistors, make them more complex, then consciousness might emerge. Nanotechnology is a science and technology of very small things. In fact, it's named after a dwarf Greek god called Nanos. That's where nanotechnology comes from.
In fact, nanotechnology really took off when IBM invented a microscope that allowed us to see atoms for the first time by scanning the surface of a material. Since then, scientists have learnt to move atoms around and even to join atoms together.
Part of the reason for the importance of nanotechnology was the development of the scanning tunneling microscope, where we can actually see atoms on a surface, and we can use a stylus of the scanning tunneling microscope to move atoms on a surface. So you can do writing with atoms by just moving around with this stylus in the same way as in golf, say, you might move a golf ball around with a stick.
In Cambridge, Massachusetts, Professor Marvin Minsky, who is one of the world's leading thinkers in artificial intelligence, agrees that now we can actually manipulate atoms, the way is open to build atomic-sized computers. What's more, he says these tiny machines might be programmed to build other machines and could therefore replicate themselves.
The first application that the people working on this are thinking about is to make computer parts, because a computer typically is made of, say, 1 million small gadgets, each of which does pretty much the same thing. With nanotechnology, we could have one of these assembling machines, which assembles things atom by atom, but we can have one of these atomic assemblers make another atomic assembler and have a production line until we have 1 million of these assemblers.
Something called self-assembly has some intriguing possibilities, and let me give you a current example which is done now. We now have robots build other robots, and so you can think of a situation where you have a bigger robot build a smaller robot, which builds a smaller robot, which builds a smaller robot. And then if you extend that sort of idea, you can think of building things at atomic dimensions. And let's say we have some defective part of the human body that needs repair. Then if we really understand things, we might insert something into the bloodstream which goes around and repairs this defective part of the human body. So there's tremendously mind-blowing possibilities once you can really understand nanotechnology more. One of the exciting possibilities of electronic circuits, which are on a nanometer scale, and this is 1,000th of a millionth in size, or a meter in size, is that our brain neuron connections are on the same sort of scale. And if we can put a silicon chip into the brain and somehow connect our brain cells to that, then we can interact with the silicon chip in the brain. And for example, you could program a silicon chip with all the names and telephone numbers of your friend, implant it in the brain, and you'll never forget a telephone number again.
The idea that computers might shrink to the size of human cells and the notion that we could add physical mechanisms to our brains has led some scientists to suggest that the distinction between us and machines will become increasingly blurred.
What would it mean to have intelligent machines? Well, the first answer is it would mean having things like people. We're intelligent machines. People are so adamant about thinking, I couldn't be a machine. No machine could be like me. There must be something mysterious, unexplainable, like a soul or a self or something like that. I think that's all nonsense. It seems to me now, as we're coming into the next century, we're getting a great picture of how we could make mind-like things out of physical-like things. I think in the next generation or two, the public will suddenly realize that we are on the verge of a big reform. We can get rid of disease. Maybe we can't cure all the diseases that we have, but we could rebuild our bodies. We could move our brains into new bodies that don't deteriorate and don't age. And we could replace our brain cells by other kinds of machinery that have replaceable parts and don't wear out and don't run out of memory and don't get tired and don't get bored. And so I think evolution for humans is in fact going to change in a new phase, and we'll have great teams of designers and competitions for designing new parts of new brains and ways to live longer and be smarter and do more things. We're creating these new beings. These are our real children. Biological children are just more dressed up chimpanzees.
Video games are a kind of simulation. They teach boys to be soldiers. But the army doesn't just need individual soldiers with good eye-hand coordination. It needs good coordination overall.
To an outsider that's watching a war as it takes place, there's a great deal of hectic activity and a vision of what's going on.
Target ceasefire. Drop a missile launcher.
To the individual combatants or the crew of a combat vehicle who's taking part in that battle, they are very isolated. They're noisy inside the vehicle, their vision is limited, the information that comes to them is somewhat limited, confusing. It's very difficult to coordinate your actions, especially your actions, as they relate to the guy on your left, the guy on your right, the guy 2, 3, 4 to the left and right.
So the Army took a lesson from the game world and networked its simulators together.
We're going out of battle position Bravo, correct?
The Defense Simulation Internet, it's a series of networks and communication lines that run pretty much around the world. And we're able to tie into that network manned simulators. And just recently, we've been able to tie in real manned live equipment. So we can have people all around the world, real vehicles, manned simulators, or computer war games, and the interaction amongst them is indiscernible to them as to whether the individual that they're interacting with is a real piece of equipment or some code in a computer war game.
They've used the technology to reconstruct and replay a battle from the Gulf War.
During the battle, there was no time to feel any emotion. There was no time to feel any fear. I found myself as I watched this battle, just I could feel the adrenaline flowing. I could feel my palms start to sweat.
Cover your eyes. You look back at what you did, and you see nothing but burning vehicles, and it's a feeling that it's deep inside that you know you've done your job.
In the reconstruction of this battle, we have tried to very accurately represent the weather, the conditions, the locations of everyone in the battlefield. Right now, we're looking at it in a way where we've lifted the sandstorm and we have maximum visibility so that we can see and understand analytically what happened in the battlefield. However, we also have the ability to drop in the weather that existed on that day, and you see how it has affected our visibility. We can look through thermal sights, and you see that it cuts through the sand and gives us a much better appreciation of what transpired and why. To the north, off the screen, is Ghost Troop of the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, and the unit to the south is Iron Troop. This is the lead tank that has just popped over the ridgeline and is about to run into the Iraqi forces. You can see the buildings burning off to his right from which they had received fire just earlier. He has his supporting troops to his right. However, at this time, he did not realize that they were on the other side of the ridgeline, and he is, in fact, out there exposed by himself. One of the important aspects is the ability for a commander, wherever, to be able to obtain a two-dimensional and three-dimensional representation of the battle as it's progressing anywhere in the world. It's very likely that in a future war that the decision makers may not be on the battlefield. They could be anywhere.
Come on, baby. Bring it around. Gotcha.
Replaying the past is one thing. it's more useful to practice for hypothetical situations, like going into Bosnia.
ARPA has an interest in being able to develop terrain databases, three-dimensional, high-resolution, high-fidelity terrain databases of any location in the world in a very rapid time. And it gives people the ability to become familiar with the terrain that may currently be denied to them. We're now entering the port of Ploče. The mission of keeping the main line of communication open between the port of Ploče and the town of Sarajevo is an extremely, extremely difficult mission to accomplish. And here we have a couple of vehicles. There could be soldiers in simulators, you know, trying to get familiar with this terrain. Or they could be instrumented real vehicles. With the next generation of image generators, you will be hard-pressed to tell what's virtual from what's real. The power to process polygons and pixels and throughput information is growing and continuing at a very rapid pace, limited only by your imagination and, of course, money.
The ship is run by a master computer, but we don't want the operators to be distracted by that, and we don't want the game players to be distracted by that. So the SAIC Command Center seems to have been very successful. Well, this is part of the information highway, they're calling it now. Things that we could never have imagined 50 years ago even being possible, much less being possible in every household in the country in the next 4 or 5 years.
Coming up after the credits, NetCetera. Start your video now. Or for a printed NetCetera and details of the BBC Networking Club and other network services, send a stamped address envelope to this address. The Net, Programme 8, BSS, PO Box 7, London W3 6XJ. Next week in The Net, the panic over computer porn. Should parents really worry about what Johnny's getting up to in his bedroom? Paris in the springtime, how computers are putting the Louvre in the best possible light. And Nightmare or Nirvana, when computers are in everything from doorknobs to dustbins, how will you cope? And finally from The Net.
So here I am in London, looking at this Coke vending machine in Carnegie Mellon University. You can actually see the machine in more or less real time from anywhere in the world, no matter where you are, provided you're connected into the internet. You could be in the States or, I don't know, New Zealand, Indonesia. Could you get a bucket?
The use of spreadsheets is explored in Computers for the Less Terrified on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock on BBC One.